And if some of the folks I went to high school with saw this, they would be like, "What?"
The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
Summer has arrived in the Geek House, for real this time, so here's the air conditioner, back at it yet again. I was floating all kinds of grandiose ideas for how to make various types of videos that wouldn't be affected by air conditioner noise this summer, and then eventually I was like, well, let's just make some tech videos. After all, it's summertime, air conditioners are a thing in the summer, I'm sure people will understand. If you listen carefully, besides the air conditioner noise, you can really feel the tension between these two. They're giving off heat even though they're not turned on. Well. That's a rather dated reference nowadays anyway. It's an old classic game room reference from years and years ago. I have a clip of it on Twitter if anybody is, Anyways, yeah, so after all these years, I have finally, actually a quarter century to be exact, I have finally decided to see what life was like on the other side of the video game divide of the 90s. This is my N64, my childhood N64, circa Christmas of 1997. And, yeah, I had a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and then, when it came time for, well, you know, this stuff to happen, I wound up with the Nintendo 64, as I was like, oh, it's Nintendo, and stuff like that. See what the new Mario games are. Stuff along those lines. I knew some parents back then also. My folks weren't like this. But I knew some parents back then that got their kids Nintendo 64s because they were worried all to heck about them scratching PlayStation CDs. So yeah, I mean, N64 was my console back in the 90s, and when you got one of these, well, the late 90s anyways, I had a Super Nintendo before then, when you had an N64, the PlayStation kids at school would make fun of you. Ha ha, that's a baby toy. Ha ha, it's a kiddie toy. Ha ha, it still uses cartridges. Ha ha, size limitations. Ha ha, PlayStation uses CDs. Ha ha, PlayStation has unlimited graphics because it uses CDs, and you can swap discs while playing games, which you can't do with cartridges. Ha ha, ha ha, I can play audio CDs in my video game console, unlike you. Ha ha, there can be movies and other cool stuff because CDs are so much bigger than cartridges. On and on and on and on and on and on and on they would go, until that fateful day when you got them playing Mario Party, or Smash Brothers, or GoldenEye, or some other good Nintendo 64 game, and they shut up very, very quickly. Nowadays, there's a very different attitude when it comes to these consoles. People are more appreciative of the N64 having faster load times, not having to sit through loading screens, and some other little advantages as well that the N64 had. It's not as cut and dry as it was during the 90s. However, after all this time and knowing a few folks with PlayStations and whatnot, and, you know, growing up, getting old, and getting over the old rivalries, I finally decided to pick one of these things up. Plus, they've been under $100 for quite some time. You know where to look. If you go on Amazon Renewed, you're buying from some refurbisher who's hoping that making these things all sparkly is going to let them triple the price or something. But dig around Facebook Marketplace and you can find these things for prices that are not that ridiculous at all. There's actually $70 for this, a DualShock controller, not even the original Dogbone controller, and a couple of games. So I bought this as a bundle, Facebook Marketplace, and overall it's in pretty good shape. Hey, let's finally check out what the other side of the great gaming divide of the 90s had to play with. So this is what the bundle came with, but it's not what I'm starting with in terms of a PlayStation collection, because I already had a few PS1 games that I was playing through backward compatibility on PS2. So we have basically a late 90s PS1 circa 1998. I think it's SCPH 7500 something or another like that. But it's the gray circle in the middle PS1 that I'm familiar with from my high school days. This is what the kids had that were making fun of me for my Nintendo 64. Your little kitty toy. Until you got them hooked on Smash Brothers or GoldenEye or something like that. Yep. Typical is basically a CD player. Don't touch the lens. I did answer the question, one of the questions I had from when I went from my school days and whatnot. You can skip a CD in these things if you tap the lid while it's playing. So it sounds exactly like a Sony Discman skipping back in the 90s or some other CD player. But you don't do that crap. There were people using these as CD players, though. The originals with the red, white, and yellow composite out in the back was the audiophile version of it. It worked pretty well and hooked into a system. But it's just, it's exactly what Sony has done with pretty much most of their consoles since then. This was a great CD player, the PS2 was a great DVD player, the PS3 was a great Blu-ray player. The PS4, you can make up your own mind on what the heck that thing can do. Probably a little of everything these days, but I haven't messed with PS4 yet. Alright, so we have one of these for pack-in games. Pathetic. Card games. Ooh. Because I want one of the key consoles of the 1990s to remind me of a 90s computer. Solitaire, anyone? No, actually it has like poker and other stuff on it. The weakest link. You are the weakest link. Goodbye. There's actually a killer spam comedy routine about the weakest link being made into a video game, except they were joking about it being on Game Boy. Were they secretly making fun of the PlayStation game? And WWF SmackDown, WWE nowadays, this is before the whole World Wildlife, whatever it was, like, hey, we have the same letters, and crap like that. It's a wrestling game. I already checked it out. It's very, very 90s. Very, very 90s. Biggest problem I'm having with this is that it's a total eyesore to play on a modern TV. It almost makes you want to buy a much smaller screen so I don't see the pixels as much. Since we're talking standard def, made for tube TVs, etc. But there's more retro stuff. Where that came from. We have a DualShock controller. I think it's DualShock, or maybe it's just analog sticks, or something like that. Either way, it's like an old gray version of the PlayStation 2 controller. Kind of like this is an old gray version of the PlayStation 2. Literally. The ones that came out 2000, so the redesigns were white. So, even Sony had a time where they were making ivory-colored electronics, like they were some kind of Mac or something like that. Whatever. Adding to the collection, we have Croc, Legend of the Gobos, that I got for a couple $, because the manual's missing. Basically, the PlayStation answer to Super Mario 64, but no. Destruction Derby 2, because it was a Destruction Derby game. And the monster of them all, Final Fantasy VIII. I bought this new, back when you could still buy it new. We probably still can get it new on Amazon. Final Fantasy IX is still being sold new on Amazon, too, for original PlayStation. There are some advantages to the original PlayStation version of some of these games versus the PC ports, but it's something you really have to appreciate, little details and stuff like that in order to really appreciate. But actually, Final Fantasy, there's a story behind that game. One of the reasons I looked for this specific PlayStation is because there was a guy who was rooming with in college once. He was playing through Final Fantasy VIII on his PlayStation, and here I was, being a nerd up in my dorm room, only having a computer and no television. I was using Bleem. If anybody remembers the PlayStation emulator, it was actually a commercial emulator that was being sold way back when. So I'm over here like, hey, can I borrow disc 1 when he was on disc 2 or something, blah, blah, blah. So here I was. He was playing this game on his PlayStation in his room, and I was playing it on my PC with Bleem. And yeah, I was introduced to some of the problems with emulation, and some of the things wouldn't load right, and there were issues as well, but by and large, it was interesting. But yeah, I eventually wound up getting Final Fantasy VIII because it was much cheaper and easier to find than that monolith of the PlayStation 1 known as Final Fantasy VII. I'm talking like $30 for Green Label for me to get that nowadays. I think the Steam version is actually less expensive. But, you know, want an OG experience? Track down the OG hardware. And here's the venerable old family right here, the old gray ancestor. PlayStation 2 Slim no longer have a fat PS2, and PS3 Slim. Now, there's something very important here. There's a couple of reasons why I specifically sought out the original hardware. Unfortunately, even though I'm the original owner of this Slim PS2, this Slim PS2 is starting to have problems reading certain PlayStation games. I could theoretically run the PlayStation games in the PS3, but then you have to think about the power that's involved. One of the things that retro hardware often doesn't get credit for is that it's old and it's efficient here. So we can take a look at this SCPH7501, but the original PlayStation was only 17 watts in operation. Not bad for a glorified CD-ROM player of the from like the mid-90s or so, if 1994 counts for the original launch. PlayStation 2, the fat PS2 I know could do like 70-something watts. You can look on like Facebook Marketplace at PS2 lots to get the wattage. I'm sure a lot of them take pictures of the SCPH and stuff. But the PlayStation 2 SCPH Slimline will actually do 35 watts. So even if you're playing through backward compatibility, it's still more wattage and more wear and tear on your PS2 when you could just be doing PS2 games in the PS2, because Sony doesn't seem to know what backward compatibility is anymore, and only PS2 can actually play PS2, unless you toy around with emulators like PCSX2. I know. And then we get to the PlayStation 3. I thought the original PlayStation 3 was a bit too much of a power hog, and it had its own version of the red ring problem, so I waited until the Slim model was released. The Super Slim I thought was a little too tacky. When we take a look under here, we have 120 volts times 1.8 amps at 60 hertz. So, yeah, I have hooked up a kilowatt to this thing, and it's like, what, 30, 40 watts or something like that? It's been a long time. Actually, I could probably hook it right up right now and just fire it up with no video signal. And, well, we'll have to... Why don't we do that? Let's go find a power cord. Alright, let's test this out here, shall we? Memory cards are out on the PS2, so my save data won't be affected. We're going to do Final Fantasy VIII on the PS1, Rampage Total Destruction on the PS2, and Eternal Sonata on the PS3. Just got to be more careful with the PS3 because it boots like a computer, so we got to wait and hit the button to turn it off. We got to hook up to the HDMI, something like that. Just don't want to damage the hard drive because this thing is more like a computer than any of its ancestors. Let's set them all up. PlayStation 1 versus the kilowatt, fraction of a watt standby power draw. Let's pop this sucker open. I'm sure some of you people will hear the PlayStation sound going in your heads. Something like that. Alright, let's fire this thing up. And we'll just turn it off because it can't save any data anyways. It's on, and it's going up to a handful of watts. It's probably going through the startup right about now. Maybe I should have gotten the HDMI converter and hooked it up to that nice monitor over there with a little too much dust because it was hitting 7 watts earlier. But yeah, so you can see a handful of watts on the PS1. So, you know, you don't mind not having like a sharpening filter or whatever it is. And you're talking like, and the thing is, all you people using DuckStation and whatnot out there, does your emulator computer draw only a handful of watts? Tico, heat generation, wear and tear, all that rubbish. But so that's PS1. Let's turn this thing off and watch the wattage plummet back down to a fraction of a watt standby power and switch off to PS2. There we go. Switch off to a PS2 Slim nonetheless, one of the more power-efficient PS2s, the power-efficient PS2. There's only 2 models. Whatever. PlayStation 2, the ASMR console that helps you sleep. If you want to know what I'm talking about, start one of these things up with no disc and leave it in the menu and listen to the It's either white noise or seashore or something like that. Some kind of, it's relaxing as heck. Either way, Rampage, Total Destruction. The game that wouldn't digitize properly because it has a bad sector. Probably a scratch or whatever it is. Fire this thing up. Fraction of a watt, maybe. Standby power draw from the PS2. PS2 Slim here. Put that in there, and let's fire it up. Let's see here, probably takes about... Yeah, see, we're already into double-digit watts. Yep, there we go. Double-digit watts, like 13 watts, 11 watts. It's a 10-watt device, 10 to 15 watts on par with. So, actually, it's different from the wall because we were looking at the power supply output wattage earlier. Well, there we go. PlayStation 2 gets into the 10-watt range. Let's put a PS1 disc in. I know it won't read Final Fantasy VIII, but let's go get Croc. I know that boots on this thing still. Croc, Legend of the Gabos. It's fired up in the PS2. I almost said PS1. It is kind of emulating PS1 or whatever the heck it does. Alright, fire it up, and we are already back into double-digit territory, even though it's a PS1 game. So see what I mean? I mean, electronics is electronics is electronics. Hang around 10 to 13 watts with this thing versus the handful of watts with the PS1. And for a sanity check, here's Croc on PS1. Just for the heck of it.
Hey, you didn't use the same game.
We are now. 6 watts, 6 watts, 6 watts, 6 watts, 6 watts. So, hey. So, is there really something you want to think about? Going out and finding the original hardware and matching the platform if the hardware still works? PS3 Slim. No standby power, but this is going to be a little trickier to do because it runs like a computer and it boots and stuff. Ah, here we go. Already up to 60 watts. This thing is an incandescent light bulb. Holy crap. Wow. So can you imagine playing a PS1 game on this thing? You know, you're like 10 times the wattage. To play a PS1 game on a PS3. So why wouldn't you just for what? A smoothing filter? Let's grab Eternal Sonata here. Great game, by the way. I've just never really gotten around to playing it all that much. Let's load it into the PS3. I'm sure it won't really do anything. Although I think after a while, it just boots the game because you put a disc in. Can't remember if I have mine programmed to do that though. That's a thing. We get into these newer consoles that run like computers, and I'm like, hey, let's run it without any kind of visual display hooked up. You have an HDMI, go hook it up to that, you know, see what it's doing. Of course, it's not hooked up to the internet, so it's probably like, can't connect to the PlayStation Network. Okay, 64, 63 watts, etc. It reminds me of a gaming PC. Well, entry-level gaming PC. Anyways, spit out the disc, please. I'm sure putting Croc in this thing, also Blu-ray based media with Eternal Sonata there. Let's see, now Croc. This is for the heck of it. We know PlayStation 1 discs are compatible with PS3. So there goes Croc, and it's not going to do anything, right? We probably have to restart the device. Let's hit the button on it, and spit the disc, please. Ooh, it spat it out. Okay, good. It spat it out while it was shutting down. Alright, it's red now. Let's see if it sucks it in when we turn it back on. 3, 2, 1. I think this still has a hard drive in it. I could put an SSD in this thing. I wonder if it would be a waste of an SSD. Yep, there it goes. Nom nom nom, PS3. Eat that disc right up. 65 watts, 62 watts, 64 watts, almost up to 70 watts. Yeah, of course it is probably sitting on the dashboard. Give it a little more time here. I don't think it's gonna. Who are we kidding with all of this? No, so I mean, technically you can run PS1 discs on PS3 with a little smoothing filter at 10 times the wattage. Or you can be all retro and stuff, and you can actually get a PS1 that still works and take care of it. Because taking care of retro electronics is a cool new thing to do in this wonderful day and age where everybody is very, very weary of modern gaming and all the nonsense that modern game makers, well, make. Whatever. But yeah, Take your expensive modern gaming and shove it. Take your consoles that cost as much as computers and shove it. Take your on-disc DLC and games that need to be patched and beta unreleased crap and all kinds of other nonsense and shove it. Give me simple devices that are very low power because, well, they were very low power to begin with, that play games that take hours to beat. And get this, when you buy the game, you actually bought the entire game. You don't have to sit through hours of patches, worry about artificial obsolescence, or wonder, well, I guess you could wonder if there's a HD remake on Steam or something, but that's not the point. This is retro. This is retro. You put the thing in the box and you push the button, you grab the controller, and you have some fun. Simple. And in the case of the PS1, you get a rockin' startup that gets the dust out of your subwoofer if you have a big system like me. Okay, you ready to wake the neighborhood? There we go. That's how you get the dust out of your subwoofer first thing in the morning. It's a bit late for me, so and the computer's still going too. But hey, the PlayStation's only a couple more watts on top of my existing setup. We got Final Fantasy VIII loading in this thing, so we're gonna get some more kick-ass music very, very soon. That's one of the things that the PS1 was kind of known for. The PS1 was the sort of thing where Sony was like, hey, you know, after listening to all that Calypso music on the Super Nintendo with Super Mario World and whatnot, maybe it was time that games got some kind of sound upgrade, and there's plenty of it to be found on the PS1. It's just too bad Final Fantasy VIII was a gigantic soap opera. Whatever.
Epic fail.
And now, the Blackout Edition version of messing with the PlayStation. For that authentic experience of staying up past your bedtime and hoping your parents don't catch you playing PlayStation when you're supposed to be sleeping. Or, if you couldn't sleep and you're just playing PlayStation in the middle of the night. Might be a bit louder than you remember it, though. I don't know, does it look better with the blue lights or without the blue lights? And as the summer drags on and the air conditioner hums along, I have to come to grips with the ugly reality of just how pathetic of a person I am. So, when I hear stories about people saving up money working a job over the summer to buy something, it's usually like a second-hand car or a second-hand truck or something like that. And here I am getting a freaking PlayStation. I'm so pathetic. Alright, quit being so melodramatic here. I actually can't get the full PlayStation experience just yet because no memory cards. Yeah, we're going back to that dark chapter in gaming history. Either way, though, this has been a rather interesting project, finally getting the part 2 of the story with regards to an old video gaming rivalry from way back in the day. Nearly 25 years after getting my Nintendo 64, I finally get the part 2 of the story and see what the PlayStation folks were dealing with all those years ago. It's crazy, you know? So, but I actually think it's kind of cool. It's a cool thing to do. I mean, old hardware can be found in the right places for less than modern stuff, or even, you know, PC gaming in some cases. So, I mean, if you're curious about maybe a console that you missed along the way or something like that, and you don't mind the graphics and everything being a product of its time, then definitely something like this would be kind of cool to do. I mean, I'm already thinking, I was on the Super Nintendo side of the 16-bit wars. I'm actually thinking of hunting down a good quality, if I can find one at a decent price, Model 1 Sega Genesis. But I actually have to work on my setup to accommodate more consoles before that can become a thing. Plus, I mean, I'm just getting started with PlayStation here. I'll bet I can keep myself occupied playing catch-up on the other side of the Great Divide from gaming in the 90s for quite some time. Hey, maybe I'll get curious enough to pick up a Sega Saturn or something, or a Dreamcast. Who knows? But I think for myself, and given the experience that I've had up to this point, the original PlayStation, including the OG gray model like this, is a good place to start. What are we up to? Night 3 of this stuff, but the memory cards came in. 1 megabyte. Holy crap. Now that's what I call the biggest rip-off in the flash memory market. I did a double take, I was like, 1 meg? Really? 1 meg? And then I thought PlayStation 2 memory cards were 8 megs, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised by any of this. Anyways, it's about time we finally could save some games on here, and we'll see how long these things last, because we know how it goes. The first-party ones always lasted longer than the third-party ones. We'll see if that's still true today. There actually are official Sony PlayStation memory cards from the 90s that are still out there being sold secondhand for like $10, $15 a pop. These are like 7 or 8. I'll bet I'll regret this, just like every other third-party memory card I've ever messed with. I think Blackout mode looked better. Plus, we should probably turn the volume down for this because the camera's microphone is a little bit directional, and I don't want to be spending all day shouting over it. Shouldn't be any games in here. We should go, here we go. Yep, let's get these things formatted on this tacky looking screen. This looks like the kind of background I would have had in 2004. What the? Oh, so they don't have to be formatted. Oh, it's not like PlayStation 2 at all or anything. Oh, that's cool. Hey, by the way, the low-res nature of this and how smudgy it looks on today's LCDs, not so bad if you sit further back from the TV. So, I don't know. Maybe I might want a retro setup with a CRT in it or something. Alright, well, we can save then. We can finally save our stuff. Finally can play this the way it was meant to be played back in the 90s. Let's just see, by going to the Final Fantasy VIII Load Save Game menu, we should pop an error message that there's no save data. You know you can't get enough of that startup. Tell you, actually, Sony only used 2 or 3 sounds for that and then just pitch bent the hell out of them. It's like, talk about a good use of AV assets there, that an iconic game console startup sound came from a couple extra wave sounds someone had sitting around. And it didn't take up hardly any room in the ROM either. 90s technology, man. Then again, Nintendo made very heavy use of MIDI as well, except for F-Zero X, which had recorded music, but... Okay, it's seeing all the memory cards now. Read? That's exactly what I'm looking for, because there is no save data. There is no save data? There are no save data? Right. Maybe video games have rotted my brain over the years. I don't know. Were my parents right? I don't know. No, I didn't hear the video games would rot your brain thing. What I heard more often was, don't sit so close to the TV! Yeah, well, guess what? My setup nowadays works via me sitting close to the TV. So, booyah! You know you'll love to see it. Let's check out some of that Jello 90s 3D graphics, or whatever, in Destruction Derby 2. One of the more interesting non-RPG games here. Croc is a little on the tacky side. And let's set the volume a little lower. I tried doing this last night, it didn't work out so well. Ooh, a loading screen. Oh yeah, we're going back for this one. This is Destruction Derby 2, a game that is incompatible with analog. Hopefully I can be heard this time. I keep forgetting I have this camera in stereo mode and not surround mode. Sometimes I will do like surround mode and I'll talk into the back channels and then I'll down mix and stuff. I don't think it... Okay, where'd my car... Okay. Spent the first chunk of the... Spent the first chunk of the race sideways there. Oh, man. Wow, I totally don't know how to play this. I'm familiar with the Destruction Derby series from Destruction Derby 64. Not necessarily the PlayStation series, but the DD series on PlayStation has me interested in playing the Twisted Metal series. I never saw that, so might as well play those games and play some catch up on them. You know what I really need though is a better setup. This setup I have right now just doesn't cut the mustard at all. I really got to redesign everything to make it a lot easier to use, especially when I want to flip between PC and console gaming. What it's going to take to do that, who knows? But anyways, once upon a time in the 90s, if you came from Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, this was a huge upgrade. And that's one of the reasons why people even went out and got these things. Because they saw the future for what it was, with CD gaming and stuff like that. And yeah, maybe the PlayStation is based on 1994 technology, but at some point, these companies would really starting to jockey with each other. The Nintendo 64 would add some extra anti-aliasing. Oops. Yeah. The Nintendo 64 would add extra anti-aliasing on top of all of this, and that's one of the reasons why it doesn't look as good on today's TVs, is because you see the checkerboard patterns around literally everything. But I can tell you, I see what the camera doesn't see, especially that ape sign over there. If you look at it, there's jaggies everywhere, because this is definitely older technology than what the N64 had. Oh, almost got that there. Anyways, this is a Destruction Derby game. I don't think you're here to see regular racing, although I am curious about playing the original Gran Turismos now. This should be more in line with what you think of with a DD game. Oh yeah. This is what we got these games for.
3, 2, 1, go!
Boom! Many people's first introductions to slowdowns from too much 3D stuff happening at once probably came from this. This makes you want to hook up the N64 and play Destruction Derby 64 again. I gotta check out the rest of this series as well, and maybe Twisted Metal or Carmageddon or all these games that I heard people playing on PlayStation back in the day, but I never had a PlayStation. I don't know. I think I'm old enough now that I can get over all the people that made fun of me back then for having a Nintendo 64. Ah, we totally are getting smashed here. Yeah, we're totally gotta rear end people a lot in order to not lose the car. Well, never mind. Yeah, see, I'm looking at the image on this. It's all jaggies everywhere, but to some people, this was their first experience with 3D, so they didn't care. I see some checkerboards around the Destruction Derby logo, though, so it looks like PlayStation did have some kind of anti-aliasing, but it wasn't as powerful as the N64's, because you can see a lot more checkerboards on N64 on a modern TV. Super Nintendo looks better than the N64, even if you're playing through composite. That's what the kind of difference we're talking about here. And it was all an attempt to bring good-looking 3D to 1990s tube TVs. This is Croc, Legend of the Gobos. This is the game that made PlayStation folks feel better about having a PlayStation back in the day, because it was supposed to be the PlayStation's answer to Super Mario 64. It looks like it has similar graphics, or similar gameplay and stuff like that with 3D platforming. And let me see here. Does it support analog? Can I walk slowly with the analog stick? Yeah, but it's not as refined as the N64 with Mario. I suppose, though, if you had a PlayStation, this is a game that can make you feel better about it. That is something I've had to get used to, though, is the analog mode on these controllers. I've always wondered why there was a light for analog mode on the PS1 and 2 controllers, and it's because some games are completely incompatible. Like, if I switch to analog mode on Destruction Derby 2, it actually shuts down the whole controller and nothing works. So, it really depends on how everything was programmed. Now I finally have a memory card that I can save to with this game, so I can finally actually start playing it. I've had it on the shelves for a while, but I've been missing a PS1 memory card, and I didn't feel like swapping memory cards on my PS2. Whoops! This is like Sonic. You get hit once, you lose all your whatevers, and then you get hit twice and your character dies. Okay, I get it. I suppose I can check it out. I actually first learned about this game via the PC version. I got the demo disc, and the PC version, 1990s PC games had unencrypted, uncompressed, unlike zipped up assets, so you could go find the WAV files and modify them to make them sound really stupid. Swap in your own sounds, everything. PC gaming in the 90s was something else altogether, especially when DirectX came out. So I went in and I opened up the files in a WAV editor, and I completely screwed up all the sounds in the game, and inserted my own voice here and there, like "Go, Croc, go!" and crap like that. So it didn't help. It didn't help any that we actually. There was a guy who actually went by Croc as his nickname in my high school, so he got a kick out of my little mod project, obviously. He's like, "Yeah, I know that game, I have it on PlayStation." I still think Super Mario 64 did this better, though. This was just kind of a way to strike back. But when you see the Fox Interactive logo reminding you of the beginning of a movie at this game, you think about what it must have been like coming to this from Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis, then... and it not being a MIDI, by the way, that's probably what the original allure was of CD gaming, even if the PlayStation wound up with this Jello 3D graphics and stuff, because the hardware could only do 360,000 polygons per second. On the PS2, that number went up to millions. And that was 20 years ago. Who even knows what the PS5 can... Who even wants to know what the PS5 can do nowadays? I'm sure it's way, way higher, and it has a lot more zeros. Well, that was kind of cool. Good to finally get the part 2 of the story on this old 90s gaming divide, although fiddling around with this PlayStation kind of made me want to hook up my N64 again and play some catch-up on those games too. I need a better setup, full stop, and there's probably equipment out there that will make that happen. And I think I'll actually use some of the funds from the ad revenue, Patreon, etc. in order to do that. But, yeah, well, looks like people are going out on motorcycle rides outside and other stuff, so it's a nice summer day. Maybe I should go enjoy it a bit, or maybe I should stay indoors and fiddle around with old retro stuff from decades ago. One last thing before we call it with this video. Parents, don't just give away your kids' stuff when they get out on their own. Check in with them before you do. I've seen some Reddit posts and some Facebook Marketplace listings that are my cue that there's probably some angry people out there who are upset that their parents gave away their video game collection without asking them. Check in with them first before you do that. Don't turn retro games into this generation's baseball card collections. As my dad told me about how my grandparents gave away all his baseball cards. And I've told you about how my folks gave away all my NES stuff, and then I wanted it back years later. You never know. Nostalgia runs on a cycle that is basically decades. You never know when interest will renew in something that we once thought was long gone and old and outdated. We'll talk about this some more on stream. Make sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell, and set to all notifications for live stream announcements to catch me live talking about this kind of talk show stuff in my chat streams or playing games in gaming streams. Until next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by, and it's good to finally get the part 2 of the story after all these years. I still think there's a little bit of tension between these two, though.